opportunity for us to get to engage and learn from industry leaders and industry peers that we look up to, and actually we are hoping that we're able to create a transformation. And then based on that, then it's my pleasure to just give you a brief overview of what does African Pharmaceutical Network do, what is African Pharmaceutical Network, and what does that future look like for us. Please, Kelvin, help me acknowledge that you can see my screen and it's clear on your end,
Yep.
and you can hear me loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So African Pharmaceutical Network, what are we, why did we start it off, and what is the journey and what is the vision of what we are looking at for African Pharmaceutical Network as an organization? Basically, in terms of background, African Pharmaceutical Network started in 2020. That was the point when COVID-19 was ravaging the world, and there was a lot of concerns around how the response would be and what needed to be done in terms of interventions and response mechanisms. On the backdrop of that, there was a global acknowledgement that in Africa, as a developing continent and developing countries as majority, there was going to be substantial havoc and actually suffering that would be attributed to this particular disease. The impact of it is there, and we're still feeling it up to this particular day. But the question that we kept asking ourselves within this particular period with some of my colleagues within the industry was, what are we doing as Africans to ensure that in case of any other pandemic, would be able to respond in a better way, would be able to actually have systems that work rather than waiting for a pandemic and clamoring for help and aid every other place that we need to. But at the same time, one of the critical concerns that we had at that particular moment was that all the interventions and all the kind of support that was coming was from either from the political leaders, from the international community, but where were the pharma professionals and the pharmaceutical industry players within the African pharma continent? There was some glaring gap in leadership from the local leaders, from the business world to the private sector, but also to the professionals who are actually the people who deliver interventions at the local community level, where communities are counting on us to serve them and to make them be assured of having access to the right quality pharma products and services that they would have needed. And therefore, on the backdrop of that, we agree that it was important, it was a time that for us as professionals and players within the African pharmaceutical industry to come together with a platform that could bring us together, could shape the conversations on what are the gaps that we have in our system, what are the needs and the priorities for shaping these conversations, but most importantly, then be able to drive and deliver these interventions through strategic partnership that can make it successful. And that became the founding principle behind African Pharmaceutical Network. If you don't understand the concept of what I've explained, and maybe there's something that are not as clear to you, look at the World Economic Forum. Every year we have the Davos Forum where global leaders from different sectors come together. Look at it in that lens, but within the African pharmaceutical industry. How can we have those conversations? How can we bring people together to shape a future that gets us to where we hope for? And that is where you see some of our priority pillars is one, knowledge sharing. And one of the sessions around knowledge sharing is the lecture that we're having this evening with David Mukanga, who is going to share with us in terms of global health priorities and regulatory system strengthening. Then we work in a pharma industry, which means we are delivering pharmaceutical interventions and products and healthcare services to people who need them. This is a regulated environment, and therefore we need to ensure the regulations are as robust as necessary. But at the same time, policies are helping innovation to thrive and grow. And as much as that is happening, the policies are also ensuring that as much as we're innovating and bringing new technologies, we're not putting public health interest at risk. And that is a critical piece for the work that we need to do and for the work that we do. Then finally, all these interventions can only happen within an ecosystem that has the right resources and the right tools and the people working within established organization with the right framework to be able to do that. And that is where the partnership and the businesses and the entities that are within the sector play a critical role, because we count on them to design, to innovate, to deliver interventions and make them sustainable, that in the future generations, we are guaranteed that Africa has the tools, the resources, and the needs that it has to ensure that African patients have reliable access to safe, effective, and affordable quality medicines and pharmaceutical services as necessary. Why did we see this? And at that time, when we're looking at all the havoc that would be caused, the one thing that is consistent, limited local pharmaceutical manufacturing. And when you talk about local pharmaceutical manufacturing, is looking at it from research and development, identifying new novel APIs and related, including the excipients. Are we able to innovate and identify them? Are we able to produce them at local level? And once we produce the APIs, can we develop the drug product, moving it to the final finished pharmaceutical product that can be used by our physicians? there's a gap in that space, and there's already work that has started. From 2005, the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa, the business plan, was developed by the African Union. How are we as industry, how are we as professionals spearheading and actually contributing towards the operationalization and realization of that vision that we have? On the other end, we have a segregated continental pharmaceutical industry, and segregated in the sense that the different players within the ecosystem are not interfacing and not engaging as much as they can to ensure that we unlock possibilities within all our ecosystems. And if we're able to unlock these possibilities, we're able to realize the vision and the aspiration that we have as a continent to safeguard the interests of our people. And that means then we needed a platform. And therefore, by that time, we were looking at it and we're seeing what platforms would bring us all together without any reservations or any concern. And that sets the foundation for African Pharmaceutical Network. The aim and the focus are the same as I already mentioned: knowledge sharing, workforce development, best practice sharing, and stimulating innovative models of service delivery, championing for responsive market-driven policies and regulatory frameworks, and finally to stimulate investment in the African pharmaceutical industry and sector as it is. And if you look at that, then the priorities are clear. Workforce development, we need competent professionals and tech workforce to deliver intervention that can drive growth. But those people, the professionals who are experts in their space, need an enabling business ecosystem, industries with the right resources, with the right kind of frameworks to be able to practice and deliver use their skills to deliver solutions. But then in an enabling policy environment that forms the key. So those three key bits form what the work we do. And how we do it, we have these industry discussion forums and engagements, training and experiential learning, including the training program that we currently have. We have policy advocacy and environment shaping, where we do some white papers, supporting regulatory intelligence, engaging with regulatory agencies. Finally, then offering market intelligence and technical support to stakeholders and players within the industry who need our services where they need it. And we're able to ensure that we have a sustainable future for the network, but also for the industry as it should be. For the team that we work with, we have a board of advisors. The board is actually consisted of the three people that you can see on my screen. There's McDonald Nose, who is a board member. We have Katie Nasai and John Paulo Molo. Those are our board members. Then in terms of the steering team, at the moment, there's myself, Odhiambo David, Odongo Kelvin, who is leading our operations. We have Esther Nyango, head of research knowledge management, head of trainings, Dr. Anushri Patel, and Juliet Ohuma, who is our programs assistant. And there are some of our other colleagues actually who are not yet here in this particular slide. We have Dr. Denish Kineni, who is also part of our faculty and also supporting and sharing experiences as we work along within this team. In the partnership that we've been able to get within the period that we've been in operation, we have the FIP, the International Pharmaceutical Federation, FPMA, 3D Foundation, and all these other partners that you can see on my screen. Geographical footprint, we have some representation across the countries in blue. I know the map is relatively small, but at least we have a presence in these countries with individuals who are available, who are able to engage and support us where we need some intervention delivered. And we are hoping that through such engagements, those of you who are in this call, we're able to work together, we're able to shape a future that we aspire for. And we are shaping it by committedly delivering on the interventions that we need to deliver so that we have a successful future for all of us. With that, I'll stop it at this point and take it back to you, Kelvin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David, for that very quick yet very elaborate overview of what it is that we do as APN. For those of us who are just joining now, we started off by doing an overview of African Pharmaceutical Network, what our approach is in terms of the African landscape, but beyond as well. That is what David was doing. I have just quickly shared on the chat a link to our LinkedIn page that you can use to be able to interact with us and to connect with us. My colleague Juliet will be engaging with you on the chat as well if you have any questions, any comments, any clarifications or contributions throughout this webinar. With that, allow me to quickly just go to our speaker of the day bio. And David, let me know when you can see my screen.
Captain, are you referring to me? I can't see the screen.
Yep.
Not yet.
Odhiambo.
Not yet, Kelvin.
Okay, it's not yet up?
Not yet.
Okay, I will just proceed in the interest of time to quickly introduce our speaker for the day. Before that, so a reminder that our topic for today is global health priorities in regulatory systems strengthening in Africa. We are very privileged, ladies and gentlemen, to have an expert in this space of global health in the person of Dr. David Mukanga. So briefly about Dr. Mukanga in way of introduction. So he is the Deputy Director, Africa Regulatory Systems at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he leads the foundation's Africa Regulatory Systems Optimization Portfolio and the linkage between regulatory systems and the healthcare services. In this role, David supports the development of harmonized, transparent, and predictable regulatory systems covering the life cycle of medical products in Africa across the national, regional, but also continental levels of the ecosystem. His work involves support for regulatory emergency preparedness. And I believe most of us who were here when David was introducing the background upon which APN was formed spoke about the pandemic and how it was pivotal in terms of the ideation of what APN does. In this role, he works side by side with partners on the African continent to facilitate development of new medical products, as well as patient access to quality essential medicines. Dr. Mukanga serves as chair of the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Partners Platform, a partner collective of more than 30 founders, technical and advocacy partners. Finally, he has a combined 25 years of experience spanning regulatory affairs, health systems development, academia, clinical research, and product development. Prior to joining the Gates Foundation, David was the founding CEO of the African Field Epidemiology Network. David received his professional training in pharmacy at Makerere University and epidemiology and international health at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and the Karolinska Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me or join me in welcoming our speaker for today, Dr. David Mukanga. Doc, please feel free to take it away. We are very excited to have you today.
Kelvin, thank you very much. I'm delighted to connecting with people and this amazing community of practice here that you have so ably put together. And first of all, my very sincere apologies for not being able to make it last Wednesday. I was in Lagos and something came up with a partner there that I had to get pulled in some of our leadership. So apologies for that, but I'm delighted that we're able to connect today. And I'm very much looking forward to this interaction and exchange. Let's not make it a monologue. I'll share some thoughts and ideas, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing and listening to your thoughts and ideas as we take this forward. So if you'll allow me, I will project my my slides from my end. I think I'm able to do that. Wait, and let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic.
Maybe move it to slideshow.
Yes, I will in a moment.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Great. So we'll touch on some of the, from where I sit and working with a philanthropic organization, what we see working with partners on the continent are some of the priorities in the regulatory strengthening, regulatory system strengthening space on the continent. Some of this, of course, is a fusion of, foundation priorities, but also, it's a fusion with the vision and aspirations of the African continent, especially as led by the Africa Union and its partners. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this is meant to be exhaustive, but I think sets us into a stage to have a good conversation. So let me not assume that the Gates Foundation. I'll start by just telling you a little bit about the foundation. Then we'll go into our regulatory system strengthening strategy and priorities for regulatory system strengthening on the continent as part of that strategy, but also as part of things that we see on the continent as we work with partners on and from outside of the continent. So at the foundation, we believe that all lives have equal value, and this mantra really drives what we try to do in support of livelihoods and well-being around the world. As you see, a lot of our work is in Africa, but we also have a lot of work in Asia, particularly India and a bit of Central and America and the Central America and South America as well. So we focus on the areas of greatest need, health being one of those, but we also have programs in agriculture, in financial services. We have programs in education, etc. But we're best known for health because that's the area where the foundation's first steps in this space really started 5 years ago. And because we're a private foundation, we're able to take risks that others cannot or won't, because either they're for profit or because they're government funders and they're accountable to taxpayers, etc. They get limited in sometimes in some of the things that they do. So a lot of the things we try to do are take on some of the biggest challenges, areas where others won't be willing to go into, that are high risk, but also potentially high return, and make investments in those areas. And examples in health, for example, investing in development of new treatments, new preventive tools, new diagnostics, etc. As you might have heard, the M72 TB vaccine that started to be trialed in South Africa this just about 2 weeks ago. That's a huge undertaking. More than $500 million is going into that investment for a TB vaccine. We've had BCG for decades. It's not an effective vaccine. TB ravages the continent more than anywhere else around the world. And those become big bets that the foundation is able to make that others potentially are not able to. And also making markets. I saw your areas around market shaping and policy shaping. So a lot of the programs also that we undertake around making markets work for the poor, as you will see as I highlight some of the areas that we have funded historically. So our programs are really divided into 4 missions. One is ensure that more children and young people survive and thrive, empower the poorest, especially women and girls, to transform their lives. So our programs in agriculture, programs in financial services, banking, and so on, are really geared to towards that. Many people don't know that. For example, policies around mobile money, our financial services group spend a lot of time and energy trying to shape that across Africa, making sure that they de-risked the mobile money sector, issues around access to credit and so on, and a big part of what they do. Combating infectious diseases, we are known for that, but also we have a large mission around inspiring people to take action to change the world. So our co-chairs, Bill and Melinda, spend quite a bit of their time motivating other high net worth individuals, for example, to invest in philanthropy, but also in just challenging people to take charge of the challenges and problems around them and take action. So this slide is a little bit old, from 2021, but it gives you a picture of some of the largest funders by dollar amount by December of 2021. Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, is by far the largest recipient of foundation funding. As you might know, the foundation was very much at the center of the creation of this alliance and has been a major contributor to it, and also a mobilizer of funding. When their replenishment rounds, Bill himself and others spend a lot of time speaking to government leaders and others to put resources into the alliance, the WHO, the Global Fund, UNICEF, and so on. So those are some of the largest funders of the foundation, but also increasingly we're looking at how we can shift that and work more with proximal partners in the locations where we do our work. Institutions that are based on the continent, that are led on the continent of Africa or India, as the case might be. All right, so let me pause there. Perhaps I could just take one or two questions. I know we said we'll take questions at the end. If there are any questions on this part, I can take 2 questions before I move on, and I can't see the hand. So, Kevin, you can just let me know if there's a question.
So none so far, an applause. I think what I see are applauses from the group, just based on what you've presented so far and the work that you guys are doing at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think it's quite impressive what you're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And just before I move, historically the foundation invested about 4 to 5 billion a year. When I joined the foundation at the beginning of 2013, and we used to spend about $3.5 to $4 billion dollars a year. It went up to about 4.5, 5 in the subsequent years, and then during COVID, it went up to about 6.5, $7 billion dollars between 2021, 22, 23, and the early part of 23. And our executive board now made a decision that the foundation is going to up its investment $9 billion a year by the end of 2028 and stay at $9 billion and go up. So our investment is going to significantly go up in the coming years and get to about $9 billion a year from 2028. So in terms of regulatory systems strengthening, our vision within the foundation. So within the foundation, I sit in a team that is part of a division called Global Health, and within the Global Health division, our regulatory systems team, for which I'm a part of and lead this Africa work, has laid out a vision with our leadership that we want all of Africa to have access to quality essential medical products through strong strong Africa regulatory systems that are anchored on mature regulatory agencies, regions, of the regional regulatory platforms, or the Africa Medicines Agency, and or through reliance and recognition. So, a collection of these, either work that is done directly by these regulatory agencies or regulatory platforms, but also leveraging reliance and recognition, the work that has been done within the continent, but also from outside of the continent. And we'll get into why that, those two last elements, reliance and recognition, become important, just given where the continent is, the resource constraints of the continent, and the need to really work smart and think smart when we, deploy those resources in service of the continent. So I have a broad health systems background, so sorry to bore you, but I want to situate you a little bit that, the health system as a whole, medical products and technologies and pharmaceuticals, we come from the pharmaceutical background, and when you're a carpenter, and you have a hammer, you think everything is a nail. But the system is broader, and there are elements within the system that need to work together for that system to be effective. And just having one of those working optimally is not enough. So these are the six blocks of the health system has been defined by the global community collectively: leadership and governance, service delivery, health system financing, the health workforce, the medical products, vaccines and technologies, and health information systems. So the work that we all do is very close to number 5 there, but that piece has to work within the broader system. If you get vaccines to a primary care facility in a rural area of Kenya or in a rural area of Nigeria, but there aren't nurses and frontline workers to deliver those vaccines to children, to store those vaccines properly, those vaccines are going to get degraded. Those vaccines are not going to reach the children. If the services are not organized in such a way that the families can bring those children to the points of care to receive those vaccines, the system is not going to work and you're not going to have impact. If you don't have the system to capture the data that tells you how many children received vaccines, how many missed those vaccines, it's not able for you to reach the last mile of your delivery system. So we always have to remember that this component is part of a broader system, and some of the work that I do is to try to make sure that the work that regulators do doesn't just stop at yes, you review and say yes, here's a clinical trial moving forward, here's a product that is of quality that meets international standards of safety, quality, and efficacy, but unless that system is connected to the rest of the health system, there's going to be no meaning to the work that is done by the regulator. If the procurer is purchasing products, outside of what the regulator, has recommended, then it is meaningless. If the procurer is not aware of what a quality assured product is and where to find it, then that becomes a problem. So in terms of the quality healthcare system, we believe that has 3 stools. You need quality practitioners, whether those are pharmacists, nurses, midwives, doctors, consultants. You need quality practitioners, well-trained, properly motivated, tooled practitioners. You need quality healthcare products, and you need quality facilities. So those are the 3 legs of the stool, and without those, it becomes impossible to deliver a quality healthcare system. And the socioeconomic setting is a key driver of the disease pressure on the healthcare system. So again, if the socioeconomic setting is not addressed, if you don't have water and sanitation, you're going to put pressure on the healthcare system, because people are going to get dysentery and cholera and all these things that surely should be preventable in the 21st century. If people are not feeding well, the nutrition is poor, those children are going to come to the facility, and it's going to be very difficult to pull them out because they are malnourished. Your antibiotics are not going to work when their systems are severely degraded. Their immune systems are completely disintegrated. So the socioeconomic setting is important. So we as practitioners in the healthcare system, need to be mindful of that. We need to work with our colleagues who set policy, socioeconomic policy, to make sure that those policies are moving the country forward, because otherwise the healthcare system will not be able to take the pressure of the disease burden that is being maintained or increased because of the the socioeconomic breakdown in society and the lack of progress on that side. And again, just to underscore that if these pillars don't work together, everything we do in the regulatory system is meaningless. It's pointless to have a quality cancer drug on the market when you don't have good cardiologists and good diagnostic systems that actually make a proper diagnosis. Otherwise, you're getting a drug for the wrong condition, poorly diagnosed condition. It's a waste of resources. It's misery, really, in the healthcare system. So these things have to work together. So let me just narrow down now to the regulatory system. And I like to say that I wasn't working in the regulatory system, 14, 15 years ago when this conversation started. I was working in other parts of the regulatory, of the healthcare system, or public health system. But, the African Union and a lot of key voices on the continent that came together and said, look, we need to move away from a continent that is highly fragmented, 54, 55 countries, different requirements, different standards, regulatory standards. These are causing up obstacles to access. There's very little in terms of clinical research on the continent because it's very unattractive to come here. That was 15 years ago. When companies, organizations that have developed products and innovation want to enter the market, it's a challenge. And so the vision was to move the continent away from those 55 fragmented regulatory system towards working around the economic communities. I like to call them as our forefathers and foremothers at that time said, look, already a couple of countries are working together around these trade blocks, East Africa, ECOWAS, SADC. Let's build on that and bring the regulators together to begin to harmonize their regulatory requirements and standards, begin to work share, begin to collaborate and build trust. And as they begin to do that, begin to think about morphing that system into a singular continental regulatory system anchored around the Africa Medicines Agency. So this was 2009 when those conversations started. And it's amazing how quickly the continent has moved in the last 14, 15 years, towards achieving this vision of an integrated regulatory system with an armor at the epicenter of it, but having regions that are vibrant and strong national agencies that are enabling this entire ecosystem. And the pillars of our strategy at that time, having listened to our partners on the continent, was to say, let's build our support around 3 pillars: reliance, re-engineering, and regionalization. And those very little talk of reliance 10, 15 years ago. It's now become a buzzword and something that every regulator now recognizes that, reliance has to be a tool, a key tool in their toolbox that they use for their work. And then the re-engineering of the regulatory system and the standards, policies, SOPs, the way they do their work, the procedures within the agency at the regional level, and then of course coming together within those regional blocks to work together and cooperate. So those were the underpinnings of beginning to figure out how to evolve the regulatory ecosystem on the continent from these 55 countries, each working in isolation towards cooperation, harmonization, convergence over time. And of course, we've been very fortunate that the Continental Free Trade Area came into force in 2019. And I think that's going to be a key part of enabling this ecosystem to even work more efficiently together. So our current strategy is really based, again, listening to our African partners, is anchored at 3 levels. We have the continental level, and so the work around the Africa Medicines Agency, the Africa Regulatory Harmonization and these technical committees, at the regional level, continuing to work with those regional platforms to strengthen them, have them evolve and become, sustainable in the long term, and then continue to support a couple of regulators on the agents on the continent to mature, towards maturity level 3 and towards maturity level 4, and ultimately to become WHO listed authorities in a couple of regulatory areas. So in terms of just a little bit more detail, in terms of the national level, we are working to support an additional, support 2 new agencies each year with the goal of getting 2 to 4 additional regulators attaining ML3 certification by the end of 2025. Some of those that we have worked with in the past and currently include NAFDAC and SAPRA in South Africa that we worked with from 2019 to 2020, and supported their move towards maturity level 3. We're currently working We continue to work with those two, but also currently working with Ethiopia, with Ghana, with Kenya, with Namibia, with Rwanda, and Senegal. And the reason that we're continuing to work, even with those that have attained maturity level 3, there are different flavors of maturity level 3, as you might know. NAFDAC is maturity level 3 for medicines, and but not for vaccine producing. So they don't yet have that certification to oversight vaccine manufacturing in the country. SAPRA, on the other hand, is ML3 for vaccine producing, but is not yet ML3 for medicines. So they're trying to close those gaps and also move towards ML4 and WLA. And Ghana is the same. We're working with them to help them set up a lot release system so they can oversight the vaccine manufacturing that is coming on board in Ghana in the next 2 years or so. There are 2 companies in Ghana that are actively setting up manufacturing there. And then, of course, with Ethiopia, with Kenya, with Namibia, with Rwanda, and Senegal. And we're looking at a couple of others, Morocco, in North Africa, Botswana. We're going to do some work with Botswana and potentially Uganda as well in the East Africa region. At the regional level, we continue to further support the optimization of these regional procedures. They are set up, they're functioning, but they're not where they ought to be. There are still inefficiencies. When you talk to industry and those that use them, they are bottlenecks. Sometimes they don't adhere, to the commitments that they have made. Sometimes it's issues with the regulators. Sometimes it's issue with the applicants, and the optimization of that is something that we continue to work with them. But also around, digitalizing those platforms, but also working with them to think about sustainability, from a resource perspective of the technical resources, but also the financial resources over time. And as you might know, in the Zazibona program in Southern Africa, this year they've started to charge assessment fees. They align with the industry, and that's going to go a long way in contributing to their own financial independence. In ECOWAS, they already do that, and East Africa, I think this year will be, I think at the next Sectoral Council, they're going to approve the use of the collection of fees through the ESC program, and that, hopefully will drive that region also towards some self-sufficiency in terms of the work sharing activities that they undertake. And then at the continental level, we are very much involved in the AMA setup, working with both the Africa Union Commission and AUDA NEPAD, serving as thought partners. We've been very active in mobilizing other funders and other partners to come on board, the European Commission, and we jointly announced a $100 million commitment over the next 5 years into regulatory system strengthening across this ecosystem with the Europeans, but there are also others that have come on board, but also our financial contribution, of course, into this work. Now, just to wrap it up in terms of how we see this emerging Africa regulatory ecosystem in terms of the scientific work architecture, at the AMA level, and if you read the AMA Treaty and some of the work that the technical committees have put forward in terms of the scope of AMA products, AMA will potentially only cover about 5% of these.
Doc, I think we are losing you on audio.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So when you look at the ecosystem and how this is going to look like when AMA's doors open, what has been scoped out, AMA is potentially going to only cover about 5% of the essential medicines list. So we're talking about, new active substances, vaccines, biologicals, advanced therapies, combination products. So the idea of AMA was to aggregate the scientific expertise of the continent. So, those type of products where you have capacity is spotty, aggregate that so that as a continent you assess those together. Then the regs are likely to continue to do some new chemical entities that are not in the AMA scope, and some complex generics, and maybe another 10% of the essential medicines list. So together about 15%. And then PQ on the left-hand side, PQ already covers about 10%, and that's unlikely to change significantly. So PQ, AMA, the regs would be about 25% of the essential medicines list, and then 75% of the essential medicines list will continue to be assessed at the national level. You know, the bulk of generics and other medical products, devices, and other things at the national level. So, and then of course, on the right-hand side of this slide, other trusted global regulatory actors will continue to be important in terms of relationships with this entire ecosystem. So, you know, AMA working with the US FDA, the EMA, you know, and others. As we understand, the US FDA is already going to position a staffer in Kigali to collaborate with AMA and build those relationships as they do in China and India. The EMA, of course, is going to be an active player there. So in both in terms of cooperation, international cooperation, sharing information, intelligence, etc., in terms of reliance as well, but also in terms of exchange. You know, those will continue to be important players for the African regulatory ecosystem. I think, you know, aspirations for even national regulators to play in global spaces. ICMRA, the association that brings together heads of regulatory agencies, ICH. Egypt is now part of ICH. We're working with Nigeria to get them into ICH and a couple of others. So, you know, it becomes important. Regulation is a global play, and, you know, you can't work in isolation. You need information flow, exchange, cooperation, etc. But I think, again, just to underscore that the work of AMA will really be undertaken by the national agencies. AMA will not have experts. Yes, there will be some experts at AMA as a secretariat, playing that secretariat role, but the actual assessment of products, the actual inspection of facilities, the scientific work of AMA will be done by the experts drawn from the countries, just like is in Europe. I believe that's going to be the model going forward, you know, but I won't put my hand there, but I believe that that's going to be the model going forward. So at the national level, just to give you a sense of how we prioritize countries, we have tier 1, 2, and 3 countries in terms of how we prioritize countries. And the way we do that is we look at, you know, the prioritization of countries within the foundation in terms of our presence. You know, it makes it easier if we work in a country where we already have a team, we already have assets on the ground, and so forth. The other element is, you know, how far the country is on the journey towards maturity level 3. You know, there's high-hanging fruit, there's low-hanging fruit, and so on. Then the political stability in the country, the pharmaceutical base, in both in terms of small molecules and the large ones, their role in regional harmonization, language balance, and so forth. So these are some of the criteria that we use to, you know, map the continent and say, you know, which countries should we start with in terms of support towards the maturation of their regulatory system. But certainly there are other players now quite active in the space. The Team Europe, France, Belgium, Germany, Portugal, a couple of others are quite active in the space. The US government and its implementing partners are, you know, also quite active in the space. And China, we've been interacting with China. We have an office in China, and China is quite interested, particularly around laboratory infrastructure, equipment, training, etc. Regional level, just to give you a flavor of, you know, the investments that we've made in the region over the last 10 years and some of the progress here. If you look at the SADC region, I think now it's more than 400 products that have gone through this regional platform. These numbers about a couple of months old. In terms of recommended, they are at more than 200 now. ECOWAS is still very small. ESC, those numbers also have gone up. I think they're close to 200 now in terms of recommended products through the ESC program. And in terms of time to decision, you can see the numbers on the right side. So the other piece that I thought is important as a priority in terms of the regulatory ecosystem, so there is the strengthening of the regulatory ecosystem. And let me just go back, if you'll allow me, to this slide. You know, the ecosystem itself, it's, you know, yes, every country would like to get its regulator to maturity level 3 and higher as soon as possible. But practically, it's not going to be possible to get 55 countries, however much we want. Even if you know, we asked all the governments to stop funding roads and bridges and schools and invested in their regulator, there are some regulators that will not get to ML3 in the next 5 even to 10 years. So how do you ensure that every person on the continent is under a regulatory system that assures that the products that come onto that market are of quality, are safe, and efficacious? I think the answer lies in this matrix. You know, if we have a fairly well regionally distributed, also language balance of regulators that are ML3, WLA on the continent, say North Africa, you have 2 or 3, West Africa, you have 4 or so, Southern Africa, you have 4 or so, the Horn of East Africa and the Horn of Africa, you have a couple there. Then those regulators can be the anchor for the others. You know, we're already seeing that happening. Rwanda has signed unilateral recognition agreements with Tanzania, with Ghana, and saying if a product is authorized in Tanzania, we'll only do a verification of sameness and authorize that product if that company comes to us. So I think that can be a great model. So if you have an ML3, ML4 country next door to you and your ML1, you know, start to look at, you know, having unilateral recognition agreements with that agency, you know, as you build your own capacity and some twinning and cooperation, you know, as you progress and mature your own regulatory system. You know, some agencies are very thin. You know, there are agencies that have less than 10 people, you know, and they have 1 inspector. You know, how are you going to inspect you know, 100 companies a year when you have 1 inspector? You know, it's just not possible. So I think that model of anchor regulators, the regional platforms, AMA, and then reliance across this ecosystem on WHO PQ, on trusted global regulatory actors that countries will decide who they trust, you know, and add those and build their reliance program. You know, I think that will become a way in which very quickly we can leapfrog and ensure that no matter where people live on the continent, they have a sense of confidence that the regulatory system that prevails in their jurisdiction assures them that they have the products that come onto that market are of quality and meet international standards. The other priority is really this linkage between regulatory and procurement. If you look at procurement practices on the continent today, procurers by and large, private sector, public sector, by and large, not always, but by and large, is decisions are largely made on the price of the product. And the regulator will tell you the product is registered the procurer will tell you the product is registered by my regulator, you know. So whether that regulator is ML1, ML2, ML3, you know, they are relying on their regulator as their quality assurance mechanism. And we know that many of the regulators on the continent don't have the capabilities effectively assure that the products that they are authorizing meet international standards of quality. So as you know, the linkages between regulatory and procurement will become important. So there is some early work we're doing with the Africa Union and the West Africa Health Organization to develop a product selection framework that will define both for the pool procurement at the regional level, but also within the individual countries, once adopted, you know, a very clear guidance in terms of, regardless, first of all, the product needs to be registered in your country, but there is a tiered, a decision tree approach that will say, look, This is the first category that you need to look at. Has that product gone through the regional platform? Is it WHO PQ? Is it this and that? If yes, within that category, then buy from that category. If it's not, then look at the other products that you have registered on your market, but begin to filter out what would be quality assured products, especially for countries whose regulators are really still at their infancy and need time to progress. And then, set up a mechanism in which those quality assured products will use the regional programs to issue product certification that says this product has gone through our mechanism, and we can assure that this is a product that meets quality standards, and been issued a certificate that then those companies can present to procurers when they do the tendering. So that work is underway. The expectation is that product selection framework will go to the heads of the Health Ministers' Assembly in May of this year for endorsement. It started about 2 years ago. There was a first validation meeting last year, and there was one in Lome last week to further validate chief pharmacists, procurers, regulators, etc. And so we're optimistic that sometime this year, probably May, that framework will get endorsed by the Health Ministers' Assembly and then move into becoming an ECOWAS policy, and then get adopted, over time at the country level. So this is what that framework really proposes, that, if a product is on the WAHO procurement list, then the country will check, and if it is, they procure that product, and if it's not, the product that they want, the product that they want to buy, if there isn't a version available, then they can look elsewhere. So the WAHO framework provides the quality assurance for that, and WAHO then will use various tools, either through its own assessments that they do, or through reliance on other regions, SADC, ESC, or WHOPQ, or WHO listed authorities, as they will increasingly be known, or currently the SRS. So that's an important piece. The other one is leveraging reliance. I think reliance is something that's really important, given the limited resources on the continent, to leverage that in support of the work that regulators do. And the Africa Union Development Agency is currently, we have provided some resources to them to hire a consultant to lead some work around a continental reliance framework that will cover all regulatory functions and include, not just reliance on non-African regulators, but regulators on the continent, the regional platforms, regulators that are ML3 and going upwards to ML4, WLA, and so forth. So I think that will be important work and important guidance that will further enhance the use of reliance as a regulatory tool. Yeah, the other pieces around reliance relate to laboratories as the continent, and again to the topic around local manufacturing, the topic around vaccine production on the continent. Currently, there are only 2 laboratories that are, ML3 or higher in terms of vaccine testing capabilities. That is Egypt and South Africa. Senegal is revamping its lab. Ghana, we're working with Ghana. Nigeria is doing the same. And so as many more come on board, those then can form a laboratory network that can then be used to share assets and to support the rest of the continent. It's not easy for a laboratory to set itself up, have the ability to run all the assays for all the types of vaccine platforms that are out there today. And so it's one thing to set up those capabilities, another thing to maintain proficiency over time. So a network like this, for example, there is a model that has been put forward by the Africa Union at the moment that we're talking with them about, to, that would, for example, say, within this network, 2 laboratories can specialize in a certain assay. and if you want to test a vaccine or a biological, then you use those laboratories, and they have a governance framework in which product can be moved from one jurisdiction to another for testing, and the results provided, so that every country doesn't have to build a full-scale laboratory with bells and whistles that can do all the assays that are potentially required, because that's very expensive to set up and to maintain. And again, for small molecules as well, the Africa Medicines Quality Forum already exists, and they're in conversation around further strengthening that network to serve. And there's already work that's happening. I mean, the countries send samples from one location to another country for testing at the moment, but to further enhance that so that there is coverage for the rest of the continent, leveraging laboratories that are already WHO pre-qualified or that are at ML3 or higher. And then at the continental level, the value of AMA, its value proposition to different stakeholders. I will not go very much into that unless there are questions later on, but just to leave that there for you in the interest of time. And then some of our contributions to the AMA setup work over the last year and a half. We've provided support to some of the committees that have drafted AMA draft procedures that will be considered by the AMA board once that is in place, I believe, in Q2 of this year. Thought partnership meeting convenings, the Continental Laboratory Network that I described earlier, and a couple of other activities. And just to give you a sense of some of that progress in terms of the related to AMA specifically, the eligible product selection work that was completed, the AMA assessment procedure, and there's a pilot this year that you might already know that is underway. Applications are being received by the South African regulator on behalf of the continent. An inspections procedure, our consultants supported that. The lab network, the emergency use authorization procedure that is led by the BfArM is providing consultants, but we're contributing to that work. The clinical trial mechanism and API database that was completed. Again, a consultant that we provided, developed, gathered the user requirements and put forward the model of what that API database should look like, that then would be used not just by AMA, but all the regulators on the continent. So if an API has been assessed, it will sit in that database, whether by, trusted regulators on the continent or outside. So when an application is being reviewed, you go into that database. If the API is already there, you're confident that this is an API that has already been assessed as of quality, sits in the AMA database. I don't have to spend my time reviewing that. You look at other parts of the dossier and move forward. So in terms of key problems, I just want to highlight some key problems that are faced by regulators on the continent. You probably know all of these, but just to underscore some of these areas around autonomy and independence, financial autonomy. Sometimes they get embroiled in tough wars with around QC labs and inspections and food and veterinary and devices and cosmetics. Who regulates that? I have my own views. Sometimes less is better. Ethiopia, for example, the Ethiopia agency used to regulate the profession, regulate tobacco, regulate food, regulate everything. And they took away the regulation of the profession, and I think they are more focused, in my opinion, now. And I think better off being focused there. Sometimes just too many things asked of you. There's no right or wrong, but you need to have the capacity and be set up well to be able to do all of these things. If you can do all of them, fantastic. But there isn't right and wrong approach. But there are places we have seen where they get smaller and they do better, and there are some that are very large and do well and do food and do pharmaceuticals and do cosmetics, but some also struggle a little bit. But frankly, the piece around the profession, my own view is regulators should focus on products and not the profession. They should leave somebody else to take care of the profession. The products are already complex. They have too many things to worry and care about, that if they throw in other things, it's just a distraction. Attracting and retaining talent is a challenge in some regulatory authorities. Creating that career pathway. Attracting, developing, training them, funding them, keeping them. If a few leave and go to industry and elsewhere is also good. But if you're losing 30% of your experts every year, that's tough to survive. If it's 5%, less than 5%, they go to industry and strengthen the industry side that you're going to regulate. Fantastic. It makes your life a bit easier. But if it's a very high turnover, it's unhelpful. Of course, illegal importation of products, regulators struggle with that. And, and this is where I think this regional cooperation, continental cooperation becomes very important with the porous borders that we have across the continent. And then in terms of staff retention and succession planning, the work environment, these are things that we share, that we share with some of the regulators and say, talk to your board, encourage them to support some of these areas, decent office facilities, access to internet. Staff come in the office and they have no internet. What are you asking them to do? How are they going to do their work? I have seen an agency, where they provide meals on the premises for their staff. Great motivation, morale. People don't waste 2 hours running around town looking for meals, and they have better output. There are agencies on the continent that have in-house staff training programs, staff development, and also negotiate with their board to fund every year 2-3 people to go do MSCs, PhDs, and so on, and they come back and stay with the agency and support the agency, and it's amazing. But not all agencies have those opportunities. Clear career paths and promotion, etc., competitive pay. We're working with one regulator right now to support a review of its HR policies, its pay structure, to make sure that it's competitive, because they're losing people. They're losing their best people every year, and articulate that to the board and say, it costs us a lot to lose our good people every year and have to retrain them, and we're lagging behind and not delivering on our mandate as we should. So in terms of priorities, if one is to think, just to summarize, in terms of priorities, in terms of how you support the regulatory system, I think legislation is one, and Africa has been fortunate to have the model law developed by AUDA-NEPA that provides a blueprint for that. The agencies that are held back because their legislation is not adequate enough to give them the mandate to do their work and to give them the independence and autonomy that they need. Clear workflows and efficiency of processes and digitalization is another huge area that needs attention. Appropriate financing arrangements that allow agencies to collect reasonable fees that are not overpriced, but are reasonable to enable them to do their work and to retain those fees. If the ministries of finance see those fees as revenue to build schools and roads, that is also a disincentive to the regulator, and they need to be educated. So in your advocacy work, to tell them, hey guys, those fees are from industry, to ensure that the regulator does its work and delivers to the commitments they've made to the public and to industry. Yes, we need schools and we need bridges, but those fees are not for building bridges. Find those resources elsewhere. Institutionalization of harmonization, reliance, work sharing, that remains also a very, very important piece moving forward. And then the maturation of NRAs on the continent. Sorry for the typo. We only have 5 ML3s on the continent. So yeah, that will be it. Thank you very much. I probably haven't covered everything that you had hoped I would touch on as a priority, but happy to get into a debate around that and to hear your perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. David. Very, very insightful and very helpful information. I see a lot of responses as well on the chat. Just goes to tell that you have for sure delivered on the subject matter. I have a few follow-up questions for you, Doc, with regards to the presentation. Yeah. So my first one has to do with the discussion around AMA. And so what do you see, the discussion around AMA and what it is that AMA seeks to achieve, right? In terms of also regional harmonization, what do you see as the biggest possible pitfall or challenge? And what are some of the ways that you would propose as a continent we can mitigate against that?
Sorry, Kevin, I was trying to get my power on, so I beg your pardon. Can you repeat the question? I apologize.
Yes, by all means, no problem. So when it comes to AMA and all that AMA is trying to do with regards to regional harmonization as well, right? What do you see as the biggest possible pitfall or challenge? And what can we do as a continent to mitigate against this?
Wow. Tough question. Frankly, for me, the biggest issue around AMA in terms of just meeting its mandate going forward, I would mention the perhaps top three in the order that I think they are. One is leadership. That's going to be the most important. I have said this in a couple of circles. You know, if whoever is going to choose the AMA Director General chooses a former Minister of Sports, and all due respect to Ministers of Sports, you know, who are no longer Ministers of Health and need a job and have no regulatory background or science background, that's going to be a disaster. Leadership is going to be key. So that's the number one. That's the top currency. If AMA gets that wrong, we might as well pack our bags and go home. Leadership is number one. Number two is in terms of, and when you have that leadership, I think a lot of things go away. They will be able to navigate and pull the regulators to offer their support and involvement and carry everybody along, people that really have experience doing that on the continent. So that is one. Number two, I think, is over time, and it's good where AMA has started with a non-binding mandate. But I think once AMA gets to become a WHO-listed authority, and that might take 7-10 years. Once AMA becomes a WHO-listed authority, my view is that the Council of Health Ministers should give AMA a binding mandate, so that products that are specific for AMA are authorized just like in Europe. If we don't do that, we have seen it with the regional platforms. You know, these opinions, it's an opinion, I can take it, I don't have to take it. You know, it dilutes the impact of that work. So for me, that's the second one, and that's sort of there's a bit of runway. It probably can't happen in the first 3 years, but you know, once AMA gets that credibility, becomes an ML3, and we're working with WHO and asking them to see how they can prepare to and help AMA get to ML3 very quickly and potentially become a WHO-listed authority in 7 to 10 years. Once that happens, I think a binding mandate will be important. If AMA doesn't have that in 10 years, 20 years, it's still opinions. I'm not sure that that's an AMA that's going to really be transformative for the continent. And then thirdly, and again, this relates to the leadership, is that making sure that you're carrying everybody along, making sure it is science-based, you know, you have a strong scientific base, the technical committee is doing its work, you know, and the decisions that are being made are technical, but at the same time, you're making sure that all the regions are involved in the work and so on. For me, I think those are the three. There may be other issues, but if you set the leadership and give AMA its mandate in 7-10 years, I think we're home and dry.
Thank you very much for that. Very elaborate. My second question, and this comes from John, right? And so John is asking a question around the work that you do with the foundation, right? But also by extension, other global health partners. So his question is, how can the foundation and other global health partners support in political engagement to accelerate AMA ratification? Yeah, so how can the foundation and other global health partners support in political engagements to accelerate AMA ratification?
Great question there, and a very important piece of work, because as you know, to date, officially, I think there are 26. We know that there are another 3 countries that have ratified or, of very close, but haven't deposited those instruments. So give or take under 30, but we need the rest of the other 25 countries to come on board. Now that work is really critical. There's an alliance called the Africa Medicines Agency Treaty Alliance, and the many partners that are part of that. We are not, and I'll explain shortly why we are not. We're very interested in this work. We're very supportive. One of your directors, John Paulo Molo, is my go-to person when it comes to ratification, and we work very closely. They can do that, but we can't. As a private foundation, we are prohibited from lobbying, and lobbying is any actions that come anywhere close to asking a government to undertake legislative change. We are prohibited from doing that. So unfortunately, we can't put our fingers in AMA ratification. We can cheer you, we can talk about why AMA is important and how it will be transformative for the continent. When we meet a Minister of Health, we tell them AMA is a good thing, it's a great vision, support it, but we cannot tell them get that instrument and take it to Parliament because we are prohibited. But it's important that partners support that and get as many countries on the continent to be part of AMA.
Thank you for that clarification. My other question comes from, I think Vanessa is asking more on the regional trade blocks, right? So more from the Economic Community of Central Africa and then West Africa as well. Are you at liberty to be able to share which countries are seeking WHO ML3?
In Central Africa.
Central and West Africa. So the Central Bloc and then the West.
Well. I mean, many countries do aspire, and many countries have done their own self-benching. At least in sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps almost every country, if it's not just maybe a handful, 3 or 4, that haven't done their own self-benchmarking, because that's the first step. You get the global benchmarking tool, self-assess yourself. Some of those are facilitated through workshops by WHO and so on. But in terms of now proactively seeking to invite WHO to come and assess the agency, in West Africa, I know Senegal, we're working in Senegal, and we know that they have invited WHO. WHO has made a preliminary visit there last year. They haven't been formally benchmarked yet, but they're working towards ML3 for both medicines and vaccines. I know Burkina is, I know Cote d'Ivoire is. I don't think they've invited WHO yet because, WHO also, their team is trying to assess agencies all over the world. So they have to put you on the schedule, and they have to know that you're really making progress before they come to do that assessment. So, but those are countries that are working towards that, perhaps in the near term to invite WHO for assessment. In Central Africa, we don't work as closely with Central Africa, so I wouldn't speak with authority on Central Africa. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I have someone who, this is Trevor, yeah? So Trevor is asking, first of all, he says, excellent presentation. He wants some clarification on how AMA will sort out the issues of queues with regards to getting samples tested out, especially labs spread out across the continent, given the higher weight and attention Just a minute. Given the higher weight and attention, it's a long one. So how AMA is going to sort out the issue of queues across the continent, given the higher weight and attention that is given to herbal preparations and newer pharmaceuticals in general. So maybe take that, and then I can take the second part of the question.
All right. I hope I understand. I hope I understand the question well. Whether this is testing for, post-market surveillance. Again, my sense is that AMA's scope, at least as we know it, what I have seen from the technical committees and the discussion, again, the scope of AMA is limited. So please don't, let's remember that generics, the bulk of generics will not go to AMA. So these are new active substance, biosimilars, vaccines, gene therapy when it comes for sickle cell disease, those kind of complex things, So it is that group of products. So whether it is post-markets, I believe AMA will have a program for the products that it cares about on post-market. There'll probably be a larger substandard falsified program, even for products that are not in scope for AMA assessment. I would think so. But those, I think the assessments, the testing will be done at country level and so on. But perhaps some coordination with AMA for the products that are not in the AMA scope. So having said that, my sense is that the labs that will be part of the network that is being developed will be those that will support that work, when it comes to, testing as post-market, or whether it's a vaccine lot testing and lot release. If it is for the, small molecules at registration time, I think WHO's view and our own view as a foundation is it doesn't make sense to test products at registration. Nobody's going to give you a product that's going to fail at registration. So it's a waste of time. That's WHO's view, not mine. But I also believe that's correct. Yeah.
And I think related to that, his question still is, so how will this particular system, so how will these systems affect the speed of bringing in new drugs to the market and encouraging innovation? So systems put in place by AMA, how will they affect the speed of bringing in new drugs to the market and encourage innovation?
No, fantastic. So when you think about, let's talk about the clinical development side. As we all know, the level of R&D, the investments into R&D are still very limited on the continent compared to other continents, and would all like to see that change so that our scientists are involved in research, our scientists involved in research and development, whether that's government funding or funding by the private sector. So the vision here, and I think the hope here, is that as you harmonize the regulatory environment, and you standardize, you harmonize requirements across the continent for clinical trials, for example, and that's already happening through a platform called the Africa Vaccine Regulatory Forum that will morph into AMA. You're creating an enabling environment. As you optimize the reviews, if you have multi-country trials, you bring people together to review those together, regulators and the ethics community, and accelerate the review timelines and bring predictability in the reviews, that becomes attractive for sponsors of trials, and that will make Africa more attractive for trials. That's number one. Number two is through AMA, and we have seen this in Mexico, Japan, when those regulators began to require that their local trials for new products that are coming into their territories, you need to have done trials in those jurisdictions. As one continent, the continent of Africa can say, you have a new drug for diabetes, you have a new drug for hypertension. There should have been a trial on the African continent, given our genetic diversity and so forth. That is a major shift in terms of advancing R&D on the continent. And I think that is only possible. You can only put your foot down to do that when you have the collective voice of 1.3 billion people and speaking on behalf of 1.3 billion people. So that also can be transformative. You can't market a drug in Japan where Japanese are, where there's not been a clinical trial amongst Japanese. You cannot do that in Mexico. You cannot do that in the US. You cannot do that in Europe. So why should it be the case for Africa? And I think it is because we're very fragmented. So that can be one transformative piece. And then of course, the single assessment by AMA for marketing authorization and issuing an opinion that applies to the whole continent, I think that is an enablement to access to innovation. If you have an innovation, you run a biotech company on the continent and you have developed an innovation that has been trialed, and you can get one single opinion for the continent. I think that also is extremely powerful for that biotech company, of that pharma company, in terms of getting that innovation across the continent. Of course, you still need to build that distribution infrastructure, etc. And then ultimately, when AMA has a binding mandate like the EMA, and your product, you have a single marketing authorization for all of Africa, that will be a different day for the continent, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I have someone here who says, thank you very much and great job on the work that you are doing. Excellent presentation. Even though there is an increasing trend towards regulatory reliance and harmonization in the continent, we are also seeing an increasing trend towards country-specific requirements. These are being restrictive and present barriers to access. What's your thinking about overcoming this?
I can't agree more. Absolutely, and it is a disservice. You all work in this space, and when a country, yes, they may have reasons, they're trying to solve a problem and are requiring certain labeling requirements. It just makes it challenging. Yes, you're trying to solve a problem, but you're creating another one. Especially for products that are small volume. It becomes very difficult for a company if there are small volumes. Countries, 7 million people. How many cases you have? You have 30 cases a year of a condition. One batch could be split in a whole sub-region. Yeah, it's a disincentive, and frankly, something that we all have to challenge and push and encourage, that the continent is harmonized to the extent possible. Can't agree more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I'm trying to make sure. I hope so. That was a question from someone from Medak. I hope that we have satisfactorily responded to that. I think there's another question here. Thank you, David, for a very insightful presentation. Please, could you elaborate more specifically on how the foundation is working to strengthen regulatory systems for diagnostics, medical devices, assistive technologies, and so forth on the continent?
No, great, very good question also. I mean, the devices area is a hugely important area. Unfortunately, one that we've not been very active in. When I, put forward our proposed new strategy to our leadership at the end of 2021, the current strategy that we are implementing, devices was one of those. There were a couple of other areas. Online pharmacies and so forth, the innovation in that space and so forth, and some reforms in that area. But those two devices and a couple of others, our leadership said, look, at the moment, the bandwidth you have in terms of personnel and resources, we don't think you should be venturing in that area. But things might change in the future. We have had some interactions with the Africa Medical Devices Forum, supported them during COVID, with some resources around COVID products and coming together to align on guidances, etc. But it's a huge area that we're not involved as much. We do some work with WHOPQ, the devices group, but on the continent as a whole, we should be doing more, and we are not. And this is critical that this area is advanced. But hopefully also, as issues around software as a medical device and so forth. Those are areas that are also evolving rapidly. We will hopefully convince our leadership that these are areas that require attention that we need to support the continent to address. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, David. Great. There's Lillian, I think, says great presentation. Do you have any insights on making products for rare diseases easily accessible through the AMA mandate?
I mean, so if you look at the AMA treaty, I mean, all of these are in scope, and hopefully these are areas that the AMA will take on. Of course, it will be a challenge, you know, and somebody earlier talked about herbal medicines. All of those are in the scope of AMA. Veterinary medicines are in the scope of AMA. Devices are in the scope of AMA. The question becomes, where do you start? Can you chew all these areas at the same time? Or, you know, start small, show some progress, get everybody on board and so forth, demonstrate success, galvanize the community, because Africa is large, it's complex, you know, it's not just English speaking Africa, it's French speaking Africa, Portuguese speaking Africa, Arabic speaking Africa, you know, how you galvanize all of these and carry them along, you know, and then all these different regulatory areas and then different types of products. But certainly I think this is an area that the collective through AMA can make a big difference, you know, at least on the regulatory front, but we'll have to do more also in the area of financing and so forth. For example, you know, sickle cell, Africa has the largest burden of sickle cell disease. You know, all of us who live on the continent have had a friend, have had a relative, you know, who's been affected, impacted by sickle cell disease, and you know, access to these life-saving treatments is just not available in much of Africa. You know, when you look at gene therapy is not cheap, you know, upward towards $1 million. Who can afford that? You know, so hopefully as a region, you know, the collective of that, just on the regulatory side, but also in terms of creative financing and negotiation, etc., that together will be able to shift the needle and make these life-saving treatments available to our people. You know, they are rare diseases, yes, they are small number of cases, but those cases, when you have the patient, then you understand how important it is to have this access. You know, when you hear these numbers from afar, you just think these are numbers. But when you have that patient in your family, it's important. And you know, these are things that the continent has to care about and address. I can't agree more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. In the interest of time, David, I'm going to stop there. A lot of people saying thank you for your presentation. Very insightful, very timely. I couldn't agree more in terms of us having these conversations. Yeah, there's a lot. There are a lot of people requesting if the slides could be shared as well for their review and use afterwards. I hope that will be in order. My key take homes, and this is a lot, I think, if there couldn't have been a better way for me to spend my evening today in terms of just having this conversation. So thank you for just also walking us through from a foundational point, just being able to lay the background about the 6 blocks of health systems, yeah, and how for us to really achieve last mile deliveries, it's very important that these pillars are able to work in synchrony. So we cannot have a quality healthcare system if, for example, all we have are quality products but not quality professionals and what have you. So thank you so much for highlighting that. I think for me as well is very important is how we move away from a highly fragmented continent, yeah, overcoming the various barriers, and I think you highlighted that quite well while highlighting what AMA seeks to do, or how the various then not just trading blocks, but as a continent we're coming together, and the political angle that has to go into that, the goodwill that is required, and the stakeholder engagement in terms of the leadership that will form the framework for AMA for us to have guaranteed success. I think as we finished as well, you did mention how we can leverage reliance given our limited resources in Africa. And I think it's important that as a continent with more and more are able to say, then ask ourselves, okay, so we have this much in terms of resources, how do we make use of what we have now, right? And develop the mindset of utilizing our resources as they may be right now to really support our region as a block. So thank you very much. This has been very insightful. I think we have seen it as well in terms of just the audience engagement. I want to also thank our audience today for really making time and making this a very interactive session. David, I hope you are not, you did not feel alone in terms of it being a monologue. I believe that
it's been great, Calvin. Thank you, and I want to also appreciate you staying up. For those of you that are on East African or even later time, staying up very late for this, and for everybody who's called in. Thank you very much. And Calvin and Tim, feel free to share the slides. I think I'd provided them to Juliet a few weeks ago. So feel free to share those with the group. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I have been sharing some information in the chat in terms of how, if you are interested in engaging with the APN team, being able to also explore or understand what work we do, please feel free to check us out on our socials. So that is on LinkedIn as well as on Twitter. I have also shared with us, so as APN, we work with both institutions as well as individual members. We believe that the work that we have started will have much better traction or faster traction as well by partnering with like-minded stakeholders like yourself. So we would love to be able to engage with you, and I've shared the link in the chat. Juliet or David, if you could just reshare that, that would be very helpful. As we wrap up, so part of our offering in terms of capacity building in the African farmer space, but also beyond. We do this through knowledge sharing and trainings. And so in that regard, we currently offer a couple of courses on the regulatory affairs space, but also with a few modules coming up on the pharmacovigilance and supply chain spaces. If you would be interested in our regulatory affairs training, which so far has graduated 2 cohorts with one almost actually wrapping up. They form part of the team that has joined today's session. We would love to have you join us for an insightful hands-on experience. I have shared the link in the chat. Otherwise, mine is to thank you, our audience, and to thank you, Dr. David, for making time. We appreciate your insights, your wealth of knowledge and experience in kind of also shaping the conversations that we are having in the African space. So thank you so much. As APN, on behalf of APN, we are very grateful, and we hope that we can call on you multiple times in the future to just advance this conversation even further. All right. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to stop there. Wish each and every one of us a lovely evening, a lovely rest of the day, depending on where you're joining us from. We are very delighted that you are able to make time and join us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye for now. Thank you very much.